So, good afternoon. I think we're on air at the moment. I'm Brian McNamee. I'm here on behalf of SEAI, and this is the latest webinar in the Reduce Your Use series. And it's on setting a baseline to demonstrate success and the associated steps before and after as well. And we're delighted to have Liam Tolton here, who is a chartered engineer and a member of Engineers Ireland Energy and Climate Action Committee. Liam has been working in the energy and the associated area really for the last 25 or 30 years, I think I'm right in saying. And so if there isn't anything that Liam doesn't know about energy management, which I doubted, then it's not really worth knowing. So I think I'll probably hand you over to Liam now, and he'll just go through a few housekeeping and then into the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Brian, and thanks Ola Jamoki for setting all of this up. Good afternoon, everybody. Brian introduced me there. Some of you will know me already. I had a quick look down the list of names, and I think I've met a few of the folks before. So what I'm going to do, first of all, you can see me there kind of peering out a little bit through the fog. My camera isn't working so well, so I'm just going to actually turn it off to save a bit of bandwidth at my end here. And I'll put the presentation up and we'll get straight into it. Okay, just turn this camera off now. No, I think it's off. Right. Okay, so let me put the presentation up here. And maybe, Brian, you could confirm that you're seeing the first page of it there? No, not yet.
Not yet, Liam, no.
Hang on, let me just see. I need to do something else here. I need to go share the whole screen this time. And now you should hopefully be able to see it.
Yeah, that's it now, yeah.
Right, okay, so our topic for today is establishing an energy baseline for success. And just a couple of housekeeping rules. We're going to record the event, so you will be able to get access to the recording afterwards. Your cameras will be off and you'll be muted. But if you want to submit a question, please do so on the chat. Brian will moderate the questions, and at the end of the session, which takes about 30 minutes or so, we will answer the questions in about a 10-minute session. So we should be finished by circa 20 to 3. Now, I will stay on a little bit. If anybody has any particularly difficult or awkward questions, we can stay on a little bit to attend to those afterwards. So we won't just bring the shutters down at 20 to 3 rather. So we will have a recording and we will send you a set of the slides, so you don't need to worry about making too many notes. You'll get a set of the slides available after the event. Okay, so what are the learning outcomes from today? Well, the learning outcomes will be how to establish an energy baseline using your energy bills and any other consumption data you have. You may have meters or other things. I'm also going to deal very briefly with the M&R system, because you're all party to that system. There is a lot of good information in there. I'm going to just go through very quickly how you can extract some of that information to use in your efforts. Using the data from your energy bills obviously will be important, and sometimes the units that you're building are not considered energy units. They may be volume units. So I'm going to show you how to convert from build units to energy units, so you can count everything in energy unit terms. And hopefully then you'll be able to demonstrate success in your campaign. I'll give you some pointers as to how you might do that. And that will vary depending on the type of organization you are, the size of your organization, etc. So you may be just dealing with 1 or 2 small offices, or on the other hand, you could have some local authorities there with hundreds of MPRNs each. So it will be a little bit different for each particular organization. So the presentation is a little bit generalized, but remember, each organization will be a little bit different. Okay, so where does establishing a baseline fit in the 5 pillars of Energy Map? Some of you may have heard of Energy Map. It's basically a structured energy management system developed by SEAI. 5 pillars: commit, identify, plan, take action, and review. It's a little bit like the old plan, do, check, act type approach. But the identify pillar is where establishing the baseline fits in. It's identifying what energy you've used and comparing it to maybe a previous period. So why should we establish a baseline for the reduce your use campaign? Well, essentially, what you would like to do is you would like to look back at the last time you ran the Reduce Your Use campaign, maybe 2022, 23. So you may have done it, I think it was established first in late 22, and not long after the Ukraine invasion. So 2022, 23, 23, 24, and now you'll be into 24, 25. And all of that assumes, if you compared your performance across those 3 sets of reduce your use campaigns, you might say, well, you know, you could just do that and compare one with the other, which is all very fine as long as everything else remains the same. But of course, it doesn't always remain the same. For example, you might have extended an office, you might have put on another facility, you might have a new facility, or you might have closed down an old facility. So things will change over those periods. So when you're making the comparison, you have to kind of think about, am I comparing like with like here, year on year? In particular with thermal energy, because you might want to normalize that to take into account of a warmer or colder winter period. So last winter was a mild winter. Maybe this one will be a colder winter. And, you know, if you have a lot of energy used in more energy used in a colder winter, and you compare it to a warmer winter, you might say, well, you know, we've actually got worse here. Or energy performance has reduced because we've used more energy. Well, maybe it hasn't. Maybe you've used only the required extra amount of energy you needed to use because it was a bit colder. And maybe you were even more efficient in that respect. So you may want to normalize this. Now, I have a section on how to normalize data and use what's called heating degree day regression. I've included it in the slides, so you will see it in the handouts. We just may not have enough time to cover it in detail in the 30-minute slot. And if not, I'm willing to stay back after 20 to 3. And anybody who wants me to go through that in a little bit more detail, I can certainly do it. But at least you will get it in the handouts, okay? So that little piece really is a little bit of extra stuff I put in, but it may not be applicable to everybody. Right, where do we start? Well, the best place to start off is with the energy bills. So the first question, and really I'm challenging you now to some questions. So if you have a notebook beside you, you can kind of, you know, even jot down some ideas as you go along. Well, first of all, who gets the bills? You're on the seminar today. Do you ever actually see the bills? Now, if not, ideally you should try to get copies of the bills for the reduce your use period that we're going to compare to, October to March of 2023, 2024. If you don't have copies or access to your bills, either through an online billing system or in a hard copy, it's going to be very difficult to do this because the real data is in the bills. Now, electricity and natural gas, if you're on the natural gas grid, they're billed in energy units. So kilowatt hours is the unit of energy, and the electricity bill is billed in kilowatt hours, and the gas bill, natural gas bill, is billed in kilowatt hours. And that makes it quite straightforward because it's energy is energy. You use a certain amount of electricity, a certain amount of natural gas. You can add them both up as long as they're all in kilowatt hours, and you're home free. You know how much total energy you use. Now, that's not so easy for other fuels. LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, is billed in volume, usually in litres, or it could be in cubic meters if you're a very big user. Heating oil is billed in volume. Again, it's usually litres. If you get a load of heating oil in from your heating oil supplier and it's 1,000 litres to fill the tank, well, you'll see a bill for 1,000 litres come in. But remember, you're not buying litres of fuel oil or heating oil, you're buying kilowatt hours of energy ultimately, because it's all energy is what you're buying here. So fuels billed in volume are more difficult to baseline because their deliveries are a bit sporadic. So you may decide October to March is the period you want to compare, and you go back to October of 24, just the October just passed, and you find there's been no deliveries of oil at all, October or so far in November. But if you look back to September, you might find there was 10,000 litres of oil delivered, or 5,000 or 3,000 delivered in September because somebody said, well, we better get ready for the winter, we'll top up our tank. So you have to be cognizant of how much, when these deliveries happen. And if they're happening very regularly and you've got a lot of data coming in, that washes out a little bit. But if you're only dealing with a couple of offices and there's a small number of deliveries, you do have to be careful because the stock as well that's in the tank could be very low. You could put in a lot to fill it and you might say, oh, sure, we've used all that, but maybe you haven't. Come next March, that tank might still be half full. So adjusting for stock might be an issue if you were really trying to do this very precisely. But if you have a lot of places using oil and you're getting all of the deliveries in a group, that will tend to wash out a little bit statistically if you have quite a bit of data. If you've got a small number of locations, the sporadic nature of fuel deliveries makes baselining a little bit more difficult and a bit more challenging. Okay, now, because I've said these fuels come in volume, well, how do we, or weight indeed, if it's a biomass like wood pellets or wood chips, how do we convert them to kilowatt hours? Well, we'll use a conversion factor. I've given you three of the more common ones here. Kerosene, about 10.18 kilowatt hours per litre. Gas oil, sometimes called home heating oil, and confusingly enough, kerosene is sometimes called home heating oil as well. So you have to see which type of home heating oil you're getting. 10.55 kilowatt hours per litre. And LPG, you might say, well, you know, LPG is great. It's much cheaper than gas oil or kerosene per litre. But look, you're not getting all the energy. So you're only getting about 7.1 kilowatt hours of energy per litre of LPG compared to 10 or 10.5 for kerosene and gas oil. And that's a very important consideration because you really can't just compare them, for example, on price, because it's energy you're buying, remember. So it's kilowatt hours, cost per kilowatt hour is really what you're interested in when you're comparing fuels. Now, so wood pellets, typically 4.8 kilowatt hours per kilo. Wood chips have a bit of a range, about 3.86 to about 4.26, depending on the wood type and the moisture content. So depending on what you're buying, if you're using wood, that can be a little bit more variable. I've just given you a few pointers there, but the place to find it really is if you've got some of the less common ones, if you're using peat or coal or something else. Check out the SEI website. Now, I didn't put the link in here because the link, when I did paste it, took up about half the page. So the easiest thing to do is Google SEI domestic fuel cost comparison. Up will come a link. There you can see it there. Click on the link and it will open the latest one. SEI publishes these every quarter. And you can see, it shows the fuel, the form of the fuel, the unit of supply, as we say, litres, for example, in the oils. And LPG could be litres, or if they're in bottles, butane and propane, they'll be in kilograms. And the gross calorific value is the one on the right-hand side that we're interested in. And for example, the gas oils are 10.55, 10.18. So that will, and the bulk LPG is 7.09. So you can kind of see here very clearly how to convert your units of purchase of those fuels into kilowatt hours. And I really suggest that you always consider doing everything in energy in kilowatt hour terms. Right. So now, how good is the data you're using is the next question. Well, generally, electricity and gas will be accurate unless the bills show estimated readings. Now, here's an example. This is an Energia bill, but they'll all be very similar. If you see an A beside the reading here, you will know that is an actual reading. In other words, the meter was read. If that had an E beside it, you will know that the meter was an estimated reading. Now, if you see a lot of estimates on the readings, I would suggest that you ring in the reading to your supplier. All the suppliers have some kind of a system whereby you can phone them in or email them, usually by phone, some by text. Then it will show the next time in your bill as a customer read, a CU. And I would bet a lot of your locations, especially remoter ones, maybe with local authorities, where there's not always somebody in the location, meter reader will come around. You're entitled to reading 3 times a year. Basically, that's every kind of 2-month reading, 3 times a year. So every second bill technically could be estimated, even if the meter reader can get access. So I would genuinely say, if you see a lot of E's, establish a system whereby you can ring them in. And it would be useful to do that, say, for November, December, January, February, and March, because then next year when you do to reduce your use, at least you'll be sure the bills are accurate then, especially if you've got a relatively small number. If you've got a large number, this becomes a greater challenge, obviously. So that's how you tell if a meter reading is estimated or not. Now, the estimations are done in accordance with a model, so generally they're pretty good, but after a period of lots of estimations, they can diverge quite a bit from the model, so it is worth definitely getting more accurate readings. Now, the next potential source of data is using the M&R system data. Now, you'll be on the system, so for reduce your use comparison, ideally we'd like monthly data, or at least 2 monthly data, but monthly data is probably the best way to do it if you can. So you can look back in your bills for electricity and gas, or you can actually go into the M&R system and review your performance. Now, you may not have access to the M&R system, but somebody in your organization does, and you could ask them just to spend a bit of time with you, just go through it. They could set you up as a read-only user indeed, in which case you could then have access on a read-only basis and you could view this yourself. So what you do is you go to, this is what the home page looks like. It'll have different stuff on the right-hand side, but all the left-hand side will be fine. You go to review your performance where my arrow is there. You click that, and it brings up the review performance tabs on the right. Lots of different links, but the one you will want is MPRN electricity consumption. And you can also get it for GPRNs, but I'll talk a little bit about that anon. But for electricity, the MPRN is the one I want to draw your attention to. So if you click on that, then you will be able to download, and I haven't shown you the full set of slides here, but it'll be obvious enough. When you go in, it'll say download, and then you can click the download. And then this is an example from SEI's own offices. And you can see here, you can literally see right back to 2009 for every month for any MPRN you choose. And there's a filtering system. You can filter out the one you're interested in, or the ones you're interested in. And for example, I've just highlighted there October, November, and December of 2023. Now, the only downside of this is that the M&R system only has data in it at the moment up to the end of 2023, because that's the current M&R cycle. But at least 3 months of data by MPRN on a monthly basis is better than nothing, absolutely. So it is definitely worth getting the hang of this. And there's lots of good information. And remember, if you're doing this again next year, if you get set up as a read-only user, it'll really make things much easier for you, because you will then next year be able to see the first 3 months of the year. So that is how to use the M&R. Now, M&R for natural gas and other fuels is a little bit of a challenge, because gas and other fuels are only available on an annual basis. And they're only available, gas is available for each GPRN on an annual basis. But the fuels like oil are only available for the whole organization on an annual basis. So that really isn't a lot of use to you when you're doing, if you've got 30 locations using oil, you'll only see one number in the against kerosene or gas oil in the M&R system. It won't tell you where that fuel went to. So you will have to go back to the bills for that, really. The same is true for bulk purchases like LPG, wood chips. Sometimes there might be an oil meter in the boiler room feed line. If there is, you can get your folks to check that out. And there's a couple of examples of the types of meters that might be there. If they aren't there, to be honest, they're not very expensive. And if you use a lot of oil in any particular location, in my view, it's worth investing in an oil meter. From your oil tank, typically, if you've got 4 or 5 boilers, you could at least monitor all the oil you used. And then you would read that meter on a monthly basis, just like you would read an electricity meter at home if you had an inclination to do that. So yeah, it's worth it if you use a lot of oil. And some of them may even have them already, and you may not even know they exist. So it is definitely worth checking with your facilities folks to see, do you have oil metering already available? And if you have, that's really is very, very useful. But, you know, realistically, probably a minority of you will have some oil metering already. Now, once you have gathered this information, how do you convert it? Now, you could do what I showed you there earlier, take the conversion units, look at the bills, put all those into a spreadsheet yourself, multiply each of them by the relevant conversion factor. But SEI has a build tracker tool to help you do that. Now, there's a multi-year version. This is taken from the multi-year. There's also a single-year version. So again, if you just Google Energy Bills Tracker Tool, SEAI, it will come up. You can download it. It's a fabulous spreadsheet. It has a separate tab for electricity, for oil, types of oil, for LPG, for solid fuel. All of them are there. So you can plug in even the deliveries you can plug in on oil, and then it will do the calculation and give you a summary of all of your energy in kilowatt hours. So all the conversions are done for you automatically. So I would definitely recommend you do that. You can plug in the costs, and it'll also automatically calculate the carbon dioxide emissions. So it's a really powerful tracker tool. We've been using it for years and years, and I'm not so sure that people really get a lot of value out of it because they tend not to use it. Whereas I really would strongly recommend, if you want to do this manually, and if you've only got 3 or 4 locations, you want to do it manually, this is as good a tool as any that's out there. And it means that you don't have to worry about any of the conversions. Conversions to kilowatt hours are all done automatically. So that's the Energy Bills Tracker tool. As I say, 2 different versions of it, and it's easy enough to use. Electricity and gas bills analysis. Each of these suppliers will present their bills in slightly different ways, depending on your scale of consumption. I would recommend you go to your supplier's website for specific explanations of the format of your bill. You saw the page I downloaded there from the Energia one about the estimations. Every one of the suppliers has something similar, and whoever you're with, you can go and actually have a look to see how that's done. Now, the other thing to do, which is really useful, is to sign up for online billing if you're not already signed up. You are signed up, try to find who in the organization has access to that, and then you can download the bills directly, and it's, again, really, really useful. Bills, typically, there's 2 types of charges. There's the energy charge, the electricity or gas as it's delivered, and then there's the pass-through charge. These are the cost of the distribution systems and the transmission systems to get the power to you. Suppliers generally compete only on the energy charge, but the pass-through charges, sometimes the tariffs include the whole pass-through charge in one rate. So you may not see them split, especially on the smaller ones. The larger ones, they will generally split them out. Okay. How do you read your meter? Well, a couple of different types of meters. The really old-fashioned ones, the 24-hour mechanical. This is a day and night mechanical, day at the top, night at the bottom. And this is a business electronic meter. This is a meter that's electronically read automatically. If you want to see what the readings are, you can press the yellow buttons and it'll step through the system for you. That's not necessarily, by the way, a smart meter. That's your typical meters that were used for years with the 2 on the left are obviously not smart. This one might look smart, but it may not be smart. Smart meters with the rollout going on. This is what a small domestic one looks like. Lots of the 3-phase larger units have not been converted to smart yet and may not be converted to smart for another 12 months. But the advantage of a smart meter is that the meters are read automatically, either monthly or 2 monthly. every 30 minutes if you're on a smart tariff. So if you've adopted a smart tariff, you'll get every 30-minute data, and that's really useful. And you can, of course, do manual reading as well if you wish. If you look at ESB Network's site, there's a very good video there to demonstrate how to read a smart meter. And of course, if you're on a smart tariff, then the suppliers offer graphical and tabular data from those meters based on the 30-minute readings, it's really powerful data. You can do a lot with that data if you have it. But that's really smart meters. Probably another 12 months before you see all the commercial type meters converted to smart. The domestic ones, I think there's 1.8 million done now out of 2.4 million in total. So a lot of the domestic ones are probably complete by now. Gas meters, the really old-fashioned type, the clocking meters, you can read those, and they're measured in cubic feet. Lots of them are obsolete now. So, but there are still some hanging around, and you just read the bottom 4 digits and take the lower number. The more modern ones read in cubic meters, and they're standard. You don't read the ones in the red box. You just read the cubic meters up to here. Fairly standard. This is a digital one. It's not a smart meter. It just happens to be a cubic meter reading. And again, you ignore the fractions of the cubic meter. So it's just an electronic version of these other ones I showed you earlier. There are no smart meters yet on the gas grid. But these, again, need to be read, and you could be getting estimated readings if you've got ones that the meter reader has no access to. Okay. Again, how do you convert natural gas from cubic meters to kilowatt hours? Remember, it'll be billed in kilowatt hours anyway, so you'll see that automatically on your bill. But if you decide you want to read your own meter, how do you convert it? Well, typically the conversion factor varies. It's around 11.1. It can vary from about 10.5 to 11.5, depending on the source of the gas decomposition. Typically, what I would say is note the conversion factor each month and use an average value across the year for budgeting. Most users have their gas meter read. Only very large ones will get daily gas meter readings, really large suppliers. Some of you may get monthly gas meter reads, but typically that's the way the gas meters work. But your conversion from cubic meters to kilowatt hours, typically you won't go far wrong at 11.1 using that factor, cubic meters to 1 kilowatt hour. Okay, submeters of natural gas, not going to spend any time on that really. You'll see it in the notes. Now, let's have a look at my time. I've got another minute. If you graph your monthly data for gas, for example, and it looks like this is telling you that in the winter months you use more than in the summer months. And that's why it's really important to be thinking about this concept of normalization. So you can see October, November, December, January, February, March uses more energy, which is what you'd expect. So using averaging across the year isn't really much use to you in this respect. So what you really want to do is you want to try normalize it. And you can normalize using this concept of heating degree day regression. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I've used up my 30 minutes, but I will stay back if anybody wants to go through it later. It will be in the notes. But the idea there is that you can look at typically how cold it is in a particular month, and that data is available now from Met Éireann. It's also available on a website there, degreedays.net, that I've given you. You can pick the weather station nearest to you. You can download the data, and then you can see what it looks like. And just to put it very simply, you look at your heating degree days, you compare it to the kilowatt hours for that month on a scatter diagram like this. And you then select show equation and display the R² value. You add a trend line. That's the trend line. You right click the trend line, any of these dots, if you right click them, it'll say show equation and display the R² value. The R² value comes up, and then you can see the closer the R² value is to 1, it means the more your energy is tracking the outside air temperature. It's a long way from 1, then it's not tracking it very well. Might give you some hints as regards how well controlled it actually is. So again, I'm not going to, you'll see that in the notes, and I will stay back if anybody wants to get into a little bit more detail on that, and I will help you understand it. So the future of fossil fuels, natural gas is going to form part of our transition to a decarbonised energy system. no new fossil fuel system should be installed except in exceptional circumstances. So nobody in the public sector should be putting in any new fossil fuel systems unless the circumstances are exceptional. Look for opportunities to remove fossil fuel systems and replace them with electric systems, for example, heat pumps. As natural gas consumption declines, the average unit price of gas will definitely increase because the gas grid has to be paid for. So there may be future opportunities to repurpose the gas grid for biomethane and hydrogen, at least in part, to aid in the transition away from fossil fuels. But a fossil fuel-free future is only possible, but really we have to do it. And when you see what's happened in Spain recently, it certainly brings it home to us. The climate crisis isn't somewhere far in the distant future. It's here and now, unfortunately. So what I'm suggesting you do some homework. It won't be corrected, so you don't have to worry. The dog can eat your homework if he likes. But I would recommend that you review the period from October 23 to March 24. Do a spreadsheet for, I should say March 25, October 24 to March 25, and then compare each month for each fuel, and preferably do it in kilowatt hours so that you're always dealing with energy units. And then if you take an initiative like, reducing your heating in the Christmas holidays or turning off the lights, make a note of when you did it, and then do you see that impact on your next bill? And hopefully you will. I mean, if you do take an action, you should be able to see some effect from the action. And if you're really enthusiastic, you might have a go at heating degree day regression and interpreting the results. But, we'll see. If anybody wants to stay back, I'll gladly talk you through how that works. Okay, that's my 30 minutes, pretty well used up. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. I appreciate I went through it fairly quickly, but at least you'll have the handouts you can refer back to.
Okay, Liam, thanks very much. Excellent outline there. So yeah, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, please. Or well, if you want to speak them out over the microphone, that's fine too. But you can put them in the chat and we'll go through them if you have any particular questions. There is one there at the moment, Liam, actually.
Yeah.
Could you please explain why the last numbers are in red on 2 of the meters?
Because they're less than a cubic meter, and normally you ignore those on the gas meters. Right. You'll only read the whole number of cubic meters, and pretty well the same for the electricity. The last units in the electricity, there's usually only one, and it's in red, and you ignore those. You just deal with the main whole number. Okay.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Just one from myself, really. I mean, measuring behavior change, which is what reduce your use is partly about, is obviously difficult to do. Do you have any suggestions on that at all, or?
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of savings, really,
Yeah, you're right. Measuring behavior change is difficult. Now, if the behavior change is quite radical, you should be able to see it. Like, I know, for example, I did work with a big industry, and they used to just leave everything on all of the time. So they all finished up on the 23rd of December, and they all went home and they had their Christmas dinner and their turkey and ham. And while they were having their turkey and ham, everything was chugging away merrily back at the factory and no production being made, not an ounce of material being generated. So they came back in January and they looked back on their bills, and sure enough, every single day, control systems were bringing on heating in buildings that were totally unoccupied, all of that. So what they did the following year, they said, right, on the 23rd, when they shut down their production, they walked around, two of them walked around, and they turned off everything that wasn't required during the shutdown period. And then they came back in when they were starting up, and they turned all that stuff back on again. Now, some organizations may be able to do this. Some are nervous of doing it in the winter time, especially because you can end up, freezing pipes and bursting pipes and doing all that. So you have to do this with a certain sense of, what's the right thing to do here. But if you can decide to do something that radical in terms of behavior change, you should be able to see it. And this organization did see it. And when they came back in January of the year they did it, I think they saved 17,000 or 18,000 euros worth of energy by just couple of hours walking around, turning off stuff they knew they weren't going to need, and then turning it back on again when they started up. So yeah, if it's kind of radical, I think you'll be able to see it. It's a bit more difficult to do if you can't see it, if you can't measure it that readily. Now, the advent of smart meters is going to help us a lot in that respect, because the smart meters meter every 30 minutes, and once the smart metering is fully established, you'll be able to come back, say, in January and have a look back at every day's profile all the way back to when you finished up on, say, the 23rd of December, and you'll be able to see the effect of actions like that. But right now, we're not quite there yet on a lot of the metering side of that. Does that kind of answer the question, Brian?
No, definitely. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and also, obviously the spot checks and things like that will help identify what equipment has been switched off, lights switched off, and whatever before and after spot checks.
Yeah, having
and
a checklist.
Yeah, and the surveys as well. Okay, well, I think you've probably stunned people into silence there. So
I hope not.
They're still trying to digest the information that you've delivered. So.
Now, if anybody does want me to stay on and do a little bit more on the normalization and heating degree days, which is a really powerful tool to figure out whether or not you've really got heating systems, especially under control, I'll be happy to do that. That's not a problem.
Okay, any takers on that? Anybody want any specific advice from Liam?
Or have any questions that they want to ask me, yeah.
Okay. Specific questions. Now's your chance, now or never. Free advice from one of the country's leading experts.
I don't know. I'll tell you, every day is a school day in this business. I'm learning every day too. So that's the one sure thing. You'll never know all of it, but you'll get an idea. And practice again, do this stuff, like actually, and if you've got a lot of MPRNs, pick a few of the bigger ones and actually get a feel. You won't be able to, if you've got like 30 MPRNs, you won't be able to work on 30, but you could pick 2 or 3 of the big ones and you could concentrate on those. And then you could see the effect you get there. And then I think you'll be in better shape the following year, because this is not going to go away. It's just going to go on,
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. Just to let you know, I think the recording will stop at 2:40 automatically. So, if you have any questions, it won't be recorded. So
probably stop now.
Let us know.
So
I think it's still going. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So we'll wait
we'll wait a couple of minutes there now if anybody has any questions. And happy to, or if you've got a question about a particular issue in your own organization in terms of measuring, I'll be happy to answer it.
Yeah. And on the smart metering, what's the sort of timeline on that? Do you know?
Yeah, well, technically now, I think the latest number I heard, I think there are 2.4 million meters on the system. I think 1.8 million have now been converted to smart. Now, the number of people who have actually opted to take up a smart tariff is actually very small. I think it might be only 10 or 15% of those. So it's actually quite small. So I think there is some pressure now to encourage people to adopt some smart metering. To adopt tariffs that give them access to smart metering. And there's no doubt that it kind of makes sense, really, because once you have access to the smart meter, you'll get an ESB Networks account. Once you set up your smart meter, you get an ESB Networks account that will give you, after I think the first 3 months. The first month, the smart meter is interrogated automatically to make sure it's transmitting the data. Which, interestingly enough, is on a 2G network. You might think it's on 5G, but it's actually on a 2G network, which is interesting. The secure network that allows the meter to communicate with ESB networks. And then another 3 months of data is gathered. And after that 3-month period, so that's 4 months from the date it's made smart, if you like, or installed rather, you will then start gathering data automatically. Now, I think when you set up your account with ESB Networks, I have a smart meter here in my house. You can go back in and you can then download all of that data in the form of spreadsheets. So once you have that, at least you've got really quite granular data on the system. So yeah, I think there will be a game changer, but as they say, we're not there yet. There's more work to do in that space, and it has cost a lot of money. It's cost a couple of billion euros to do all of this. It was not a cheap effort. So we need as a nation to get value for it, and I think we will, but we're not quite there yet.
No, right. Yeah, it should make a big difference, really. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have real-time data that you'll be able to see. Now, unfortunately, these meters don't give you a real-time repeating system, but I think there is technology you can add to the meter to give you real-time monitoring. And if you have real-time monitoring, you can get real-time behavior change, which when you can see, I mean, I have one here on my desk that's monitoring my house on a separate system. And I just saw yesterday, I said, 6.2 kilowatts, what have I left on? And of course I had left an electric heater on in one of the other rooms that I was heating up for a different purpose. So yeah, I mean, when you see it in front of you, it kind of came up with a red flash and I said, what is that doing? And then it forced me to go away and find it, Otherwise it would have been there for a day and I wouldn't have even known.
It should make a massive difference, I think.
It would make a difference. Yeah, I think it will.
Okay, so, well, I don't think we have any takers on tailored advice or customized advice, so we'll probably end it at that.
We'll wrap it up. So, and as I say, we'll send you out I'm not sure, is it a download or an email? They will get access to the handout, and you'll have something you can go back on. And again, if you have any questions, I'm sure you can email them into SCI and they'll find somebody to answer.
Yeah, the slides will be, the message will be sent out on Energy Link and the slides will be loaded, and the link to the recording, that'll probably be early next week, I would say, anyway.
Super.
Yep. Okay, well, thanks again, Liam.
Thanks very much, everybody, for your attention, and all the best in reduce your use. And have a look back on the case studies. They're really interesting, and it really shows the reduce your use campaign is really powerful. So the best of luck with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.